Good evening. My name is Femi Awodele, and it is indeed an honor for me to review two of Dr. Ogunowo's books. I apologize that I could not be with you in person for this dedication of books. I am in transit as you listen to this video. I was called into marriage ministry about 25 years ago, 2000 to be exact. And for the most part of that, I have had relationship with Pastor Kamal Sanusi and now Pastor Mrs. And I have been a speaker frequently at Restoration House in Houston. And it is through my visitations to Restoration House that I got to know Dr. Modupe Ogunowo. And I also discovered, we both discovered that we are separated by like 2 or 3 degrees of separation. My father-in-law, Professor Olusegun Ogunoga's sister, older sister, is Mrs. Ogunowo as well, and Dr. Ogunowo's husband and the husband of my wife's aunt, or uh, now my aunt also, from the same family, same compound in Ijebubo. So we have that degree of separation. And so this is a blessing for me to have known her as the head of the marriage ministry for Restoration House, and also as an Ogunowo. Also, personally, I have been in marriage and relationship ministry for 25 years. The subject matter which Dr. Ogunowo wrote about is something that I am very familiar with, whether in speaking in over 70 countries or in writing books, about 17 of them. And even on the subject itself, my best-selling book was written about 20 years ago or 20 something years ago, is on the diaspora marriages. I've been surveyed in Australia, in England, and in America. So it's definitely a pleasure for me. I enjoyed reading some of the books that I'm going to be sharing my thoughts with you today, and I hope you will go buy them. I know that they will definitely bless you. I know we are dedicating 3 books, but I'm speaking on 2 of them. I have read them, I speed read them, and I also read them regularly, and they are fascinating. The books came from Dr. Ogunowo's PhD thesis on um, adolescent sexual communication or sexual behavior among diaspora African children, and how effectively are their parents communicating with them or even talking to them. I think that's a fascinating subject, and I think it's very interesting. So, my first book is Parent and Adolescent Sexual Health Communication, which is one of the books I'm reviewing. In the book, Dr. Ogunowo, or I'll call her also Auntie Modupe, because I like, for me, when I know people, titles don't matter. I call them auntie and uncle. To me, that's more endearing. In her book, or in the thesis that she turned into a book, she identified a couple of reasons for lack of communication or problem in communicating sexual behavior or sexual education amongst diaspora Africans. She recognized cultural barriers. She recognized gender roles in terms of what is mom's role, dad's role, who should do it, who shouldn't do it. She recognized the religion and moral beliefs from a cultural standpoint, where we're coming from. She recognized generational gaps. So, one generation to another, how information is passed. And then she recognize that diaspora parents themselves have not done a very good job to educate themselves on this subject matter, talk less of discussing it with their children. Then she went on to say the why of that, the why of or the lack of communication, especially on sexual issues. One of the things she found is the communication style. As a diaspora African myself, who has raised three children who are now all adult, I definitely recognize what she's talking about. And I even wrote this in my own book in 2023 in terms of the communication style of those of us who grew up or in Africa and are now immigrants here. Very, very different communication style. In fact, we don't even communicate. Basically, we just speak to people. We talk to them. We don't really communicate. And then she recognized also that one of the reasons, the why of that, is there's a perception about the laws of the host country. There is a perception that if I do this, this will happen. If I do that, that will happen. I also have a similar experience with that. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and we have a city that hosts refugees a lot, and we have the Nepali Bhutanese community here, and I happen to be very familiar with that community. I've held some state positions or citywide things that makes me available to these people as a resource. And I remember talking to this community and their perception of what the law is. Oh, you can't discipline your children. They will call 911 and things like that. And we had to correct that. So the perception of the host country's laws is what Auntie Modupe recognized in her book here. And then she recognized the sexual disparity amongst the kids. So there's disparity in terms of kids who come from families that are educated, a family who are religious, family who, their social class, different things happen, their level of exposure. So there is disparity in terms of the family that communicates or does not communicate, this sexual disparity. Then she found out that the biggest thing is that there is not effective communication. So because of the culture, because of the gender roles, because of all these things that she highlighted earlier in earlier chapters, she found out that the focus should be more on effective communication. How do we have effective communication as a family? How do we do that? Now, I will encourage you to go read a book, but I will also tell you that I have seen that, not just in communicating with our children, but in communicating with each other in diaspora as a married couple. I often share proverbs, African proverbs, that basically discourage communication, and this is absolutely not true. So she highlighted, and I will encourage you to go read the book on effective communication. Focus on effective communication, the context. Make sure context is understood as you communicate. Make sure there is feedback, so that as you're talking to each other or talking to your children, there is feedback. Make sure there is verbal and non-verbal communication, or take note of that. In communication, they will tell you that the content or what you say is really just 7%. Your tone is about 38%, and your non-verbal is about 55%. So she kind of emphasized that in terms of, if you want to better this, you have to learn, perfect communication, and develop a skill of communication in your own home. And then she went on to say, the way to do that is to establish an open communication. Establish an open communication. Don't just tell your children because daddy said so or because mommy said so. Let there be dialogue. Let them know that they can come to you. Let them know they can trust you. When you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. Recognize the stage of child's development. This is very crucial. We, as diaspora parents, what I have found out, like I said earlier, I teach on this subject as well. What I have found is that we don't educate ourselves enough to understand the developmental stages. So in biology, in neuroscience, in pediatrics, they will tell you that there's a difference between 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 5 to 11, which is probably the most critical age group, then 11 to 13 in girls, 12 to 14 in boys, then the teenage years, which can also be divided into two. And finally, by 25, their brain is developed. So you need to understand this age group so that you know when to talk to them. Like I said earlier, I have 3 kids. I spoke to each of my kids about sexual relationship when they were 13. They read a book. I gave them a book by Focus on the Family. After they read it, we go on a date and we talk to them. That's what I did with all my 3 kids. And to a large extent it worked, depending on the personality of the child. But I didn't talk to them. There are certain things I said to them at certain time, and certain things I didn't say until they were matured. Now that they are adult, I communicate with them. There's no barrier in that. So it's very important that we understand what we can communicate at what age. Now, I tell younger people today, I spoke to my kids at 13. Today, I think 13 is too late. That's my opinion from my conversation with younger couples today. So then she said, recognize that stage, set expectation. What is it that I want to get from this conversation? And then once you get that, then you go ahead with it. And then set regular communication time with your children. Send regular communication time, parenting time, so that when you want to talk to them about this, it's not the only time that you do. So set regular time, get involved in their life. Let them talk to you. Let them share their thoughts with you, so that when you are about to communicate these, then it will not be a problem. So that is the first book. That's my summary of the first book. So basically, in this book, she's saying we need to communicate. We need to develop strong communication skill. We need to have something in place so that our kids are not intimidated by us. They are not afraid of us, so that we can have effective communication and communicate all sorts of things, but in this particular case, sexual issues. The second book that I will be reviewing now is the book on diaspora parenting. Diaspora parenting. Dr. Ogunowo or Auntie Dupe went a different direction in this book. In this book, she basically did an analogy of the life of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob while they were in transit. If some of you who are believers, you will know that God told Abraham to move, and even his children, even up to Joseph, were in transit for a long time until they settled in Egypt for 400 years or 500 years, depending on whose history you read. So they were more like diasporans and finally settled in their land when they left Egypt, the land God promised Abraham. They eventually settled. So basically, what Dr. Ogunowo did was to parallel some of their journey as people that we can connect with in terms of being in diaspora. So that's one nice connection. Then the other one that I found in the book is that she talked about cultural differences. Cultural differences both in depending on where you're coming from. I have been blessed to travel a lot in Africa, or basically around the world, but I've been to about 20, 25 African countries, and I can say south of the Sahara, our cultures are kind of similar. You know, some differences, some things that are nuances, but from a general perspective, it's kind of similar. You know, the patriarchy, bride price and things like that is kind of similar, but at the same time there are some known or clear differences. So when we come to a Western country or whatever we move to, there are consequences, there are changes, just like the Jews or the family of Abraham encountered during the time of Jacob, during the time of Esau, during the time of Isaac. So she related that in terms of those cultural differences. I will encourage you to read her book so you can see some of those cultural differences. We have differences in communication, differences in instilling discipline, differences in just a whole bunch of areas. Then she went on to speak a lot on the consequences of moving. So for some of us, we moved from Africa to America. For many of you listening to this, and in moving, our spiritual life was affected. So the theology or the doctrines of many African churches or denomination is kind of different from a lot of the doctrines here, depending on the church we attend. Some of us attend an African rooted church, so sometimes that is not a big shock for us. But for those who transition to a different denomination or different things, there is a very clear differences in terms of doctrine, in terms of application from cultural perspective. Also, there is a problem of security. When you come here, you don't have life the way you had it. The community in Africa, we talk about the village. I'm young enough to know that when you do something bad at school, the teacher will beat you. The neighborhood teacher will beat you. Then your parents will beat you, and so basically, it's a question of the whole village beating you if you offend. So it's not just your parents. Today in diaspora, you cannot do that. Nobody, teacher cannot beat, neighbors cannot beat. And even parents sometimes are intimidated depending on whose philosophy you believe. Some believe in corporal punishment, some don't. So these are things that she highlighted. Then she went back to communication again. So communication, when we are in diaspora and we are facing these cultural differences, these communication differences, these issues that is caused because of our transition, that we should perfect effective communication. Effective communication is different from just communication. Effective communication is when you sit down, when you talk, when you recognize where you're coming from and how best to do it. When I was in Africa, nobody talked to me about skills of communication. Nobody. I've never heard of it in my life until I started to teach in Married, that there's something called attend, acknowledge, summarize, and these skills of communication that they teach you. That when you are conversing, do this, you do that, use I instead of you. These are techniques, these are models, these are things that allows effective communication, but we were never taught. Nobody taught us. So she's saying, go learn those things, go do those things, and then identify some of the ways you're communicating that is not working. I'll give an example of that. When we were growing up, my generation, our parents and my grandparents and my parents, when they tell you to do something, they are basically telling you to do it. They're not asking for your opinion. Even if you have an opinion, it doesn't matter. It's just because I said so. And so there's a lot of things our parents told us to do based on because I said so, not based on they're giving you the reason why. Now we're in diaspora. Now our children wants to hear the why. They're asking you, explain this, daddy. And they're asking a lot of questions and we cannot answer. There's a friend of mine who back home went to a church, one of the white garment churches. I won't tell you which one. And he asked a question of the church. They asked children to ask questions. And he said, oh, well, if Jesus died on Friday, like we say, and rose on Monday, that is not 3 days. And instead of answering him, they beat him because they couldn't answer. So that is what you get in terms of communication, where because of their own ignorance, they don't basically answer your question. Instead, you get punished. And then Dr. Ogunowo dealt with dealing with a strong-willed child. She didn't call it strong-willed, but that's what I call it, a child who has a strong personality, a child who probably has emotional or mental issues, or who is frustrated. I have 3 kids, so I know a little bit about that in terms of dealing with children with ADHD, dealing with children who was okay, and dealing with children, and it even affected the schools they went. and the school I send them to. So, in terms of understanding that, how do we deal with these special issues, special needs? And when I say special, I don't mean negative special. Sometimes special is positive too. So, how do you deal with that? Then she encouraged us to understand the generational characteristics, the generational issues, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen X. What are the differences in terms of what we believe? In marriage, there is this affects marriage also, the generations. If you marry outside of your generation, you're going to deal with a lot of other issues. Music, what you like, what you don't like. Today, my wife and I grew up on disco. The music we listened to in college and high school was what they call disco. My children grew up on Afrobeat, Afrobeat, African Afrobeat. And so it's different. Those are generational things that we need to consider. And then she went on to how do you integrate them? How do you integrate not necessarily the culture of where you are, but but find a balance from a scriptural or scientific standpoint in how to prepare for communication, how do you control yourself. Most of us African in diaspora, we discipline based on how mad we are. We don't discipline based on the consequences. I personally did not know that there's a difference between childish behavior and consequences until I read it from Dr. Dobson, that sometimes we discipline a child based on childish behavior instead of consequences based from disobedience. So those are the things she's talking about. And then you have hope that once you have raised them, once you have this principle, once you have prepared in terms of age group, age development, what do I do? And then be consistent. She wrote about being consistent in those things. Be very consistent, set boundaries that will be applied. Don't set boundaries that you're not going to apply, and be consistent with these. And then she said, be spiritual, form a community of believers, form a community around you, community at school, community at church, community, your language community, your nation community, basically to help you in raising these kids, in guiding these kids, and be consistent with them. So I just want to say thank you for listening to me. And this has been a pleasure. This has been a blessing. And I pray that as you read those books, they will bless you. And again, congratulations, Dr. Modupe Ogunowo, for this opportunity.